And why did the child do that? It is because he had faith in his father, in his dad. So this is the first lecture I learned in school. And then we developed on that. And ours was a girls' school, so it was like women and faith. I developed that notion about faith being just not a religion, but faith being also something that we trust our teachers, our parents, and God. And as a woman, this faith really gave me a lot of strength. I was brought up in a very protected family. We had to come home at 7 o'clock in the night, before it was dark. And having been brought up, into this really protected family, I got married to my husband, whom I saw only twice before I got married. In a month's time, we got engaged and married. And I had to join him in South America. And coming from a very close-knit family, and to go to somebody who was a total stranger, we had no time to know each other very much. But it's the faith. It's the faith, God's faith, it's religion, it's your parents, and of course my teachers in school. And women, when they believe, when they have faith, they pass it on to their children as well. And I must tell you one thing, when I joined my husband, he used to wake up in the morning, have his breakfast, and go away. And he believed in God, but he did not take much part in praying, or he just thought, if I do my duty, that's good. But being with me for now 45 years, he will pray in the morning. So I feel women and faith, women have the power to really spread it to their family, to the world across. And coming back to I think it's the children and education. The second part of it is, of course, it covers my first bit, as a child, what I learned in school. And I've been on the radio for being a magistrate, and when there were riots, they said, what is your opinion? And I said, I've learned from my school, parents take the place of God in this world, teachers take the place of parents in school, and we must show respect to our teachers and elders, so that respect and love go together. And to my children, I've given them the same education, and to my grandchildren again. And a child without faith will grow up into something great, but compare him with the child who's brought up with faith. They have a direction in life, a focus in life. So education in school for different religions is very important. But alongside, I believe greatly the moral science, the basics, is important too. We learn about different religions, and I've given talk on Sikhism, and children learn from different angles. But the basics of all this, love, respect, that should be part of it as well. A common moral science. So along with every religion, if we make that common factor come with all the religion, then I think children will absorb religion in a very positive way. Because they must, when they hear from different angles, there should be one common angle that also should accompany this religious education. So, anything else? I'm not sure. 10 minutes?
I think that was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Do we have questions about the things that we've heard, and questions around the Sikh faith, or questions around? Yes.
I'd like to ask. I'm quite curious to know, Jasmine, about your job, because the title of sheriff has all sorts of connotations for some of us. Not least with sorting cowboys out and things like that. But,
Yeah.
I know that's not true really, because as the Sheriff of Nottingham and so on, but I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about what your job
Job
entails.
as a sheriff. It's been really a great honor and a great privilege to be in this role. And the moment you wear your chain on, there's something magical about it. You just feel you're not just Jasmine, you are representing the city. And you have to be on your best behavior. And because it's a big responsibility that you are, when you're representing this city, that you are able to give your best to the city. It has been very, very busy because due to pandemic, everybody wants to have everything. They want to hold events. So we have been really very busy with the Queen's Jubilee first, and then the funeral, then the proclamation. So it's been really busy, but I'm really enjoying it, and I treasure these moments, and to be part of such a excellent civic team is a great honor. I would say one of the highlights of my life. Thank you.
Any other questions? Well, can I? Sorry, Chairman.
I just wondered, during your period so far, do you feel that you've been able to initiate any positive changes that you think that have happened in the period of time so far? Because Nelson Mandela said, be the change you want to see in the world. Well, having a role that you have is very, very special, and I wonder whether you'd been able to bring forward some of the changes that you'd have liked to have seen.
I'm the lead for Lincoln Interfaith, and on Saturday we had the Peace Walk, and I'm a great believer that it's not only your actions, not only your words that matter, it's your thoughts as well. So when we have the Peace Walk, we walk with peace in our minds, with goodwill in our minds. And when you do that, you're projecting something very magical into the environment. And it does bring about some changes which you can't notice, but they're there. I mean, I have to share with you what I spoke with Sherry just before we started the meeting. Yesterday we were in Norwich. I'm the national president for British Federation of Women Graduates as well. So yesterday we'd gone to meet the members of local association in Norwich. They had lost one of the members earlier in the year, and she was buried in the eco-friendly cemetery. We went there and we couldn't find her grave. And we were walking around, and the moment I said to my friend, I wish we could meet one of those, grave diggers or somebody. They will find out, exactly where it is. I said this, and in the next minute, there was a trailer coming with these two men. And this has happened several times with me. And I feel it is your spirituality, if your thoughts, so I think it is me bringing about, I try to bring about the best, what I can share, what I've learned, what is me. And I feel, from the peace point of view, that it's very important and most needed at this time. And I do it in my own small way, and of course, being with the mayor and doing things together, even with fundraising and other events that we go to. But peace, and we have to spread that, and that is my main, that is one of the things that I believe in. And I believe what's going on in the world, whatever we do here in the city will not only benefit the city, but the nation and the whole world. I believe in this. And again, it's the faith we have. So.
Thanks very much for that, Jasmine, and thank you very much for your talk and presence. And I hope you can stay for as much of our meeting as you've got time, because I'd like you to see what Sacred does as well. But yes, really grateful for today. Thank you very much, and can we show our appreciation again? Thank you. And because I failed to do so before, I welcome Jess as well to our meeting. And Jess has recently joined the County Council and is learning the various functions. So we should welcome Jess. Thank you. Yeah. And our next item is item 9. Not as exciting a title as guest speaker Jasmine. Analysis of Ofsted reports, but really important.
Okay, so you need the paper, item 9 in front of you. So we're continuing to be able to analyse Ofsted reports now they're in full flow again. Just for those of you who may be fairly new, just looking at the first page, the type of inspection refers to section 5 or section 8, where section 5 still gives more detailed outcomes in terms of grades. For example, on page 1 at Osbornbury Primary School, you'll see sometimes Ofsted says this. The score was done under section 8, so it was good. But however, the evidence gathered suggests that the inspection grade might not be as high if a full inspection were carried out now. So the next inspection will be a section 5. So in other words, if they feel the grade needs to be changed, and that could go either way, the school undergoes a full, what they call a full inspection, although you wouldn't really notice very much difference in the actual content of the reports. Okay, so that's what the section 5 and 8 means. The overall outcome does not refer to RE, it refers to the overall performance of the school. The deep dive refers to the more intensive in questioning based on 3 or 4 subjects that each school has now under Ofsted, and which we spent a lot of our time actually trying to get our teachers and heads ready for this. Although I have to say, teachers feed back different experiences of deep dives, and Jill's probably aware as well as me that now Ofsted have recently introduced something called, and honestly colleagues, I'm not making this up, following on from a deep dive, schools can also have, you Claire knows what I'm going to say, a shallow paddle, and I'm truly not making it up. You know, what comes next? A dip toe in the water, you know, we'll just have a quick look and then straight out again. There's no end to it, is there really, Chris? Anyway, on page 1, fairly positive comments, including, of course, about British values and spiritual, moral, social, cultural education. I do want to concentrate, though, on some of the ones where we may be able to help schools. So on page 2, there's a couple of schools there, Tid St Mary, Church of England Primary School. Well, there we can see on the comments bit that although leaders promote pupils' academic, personal and spiritual development, and there is a respectful culture, there is some inconsistency in some key stage 2 pupils' knowledge of faiths and beliefs. So they are picking some, and that there wasn't a deep dive in RE in that school, but it was still picked up. And likewise at North Scar Primary School, at the bottom of the page, pupils have limited opportunities to develop their culture capital. Excuse me, and culture capital means extending their knowledge and experience and learning beyond the culture that they know now and live in now. So it's making opening their eyes to a wider world, if you like. Most of those others are positive, apart from the bottom of page 3. This inconsistency word inconsistency keeps coming up, doesn't it? St Helena's Church of England Primary School, bottom page 3, there is some inconsistency in knowledge. Some pupils are unsure about British values, etc., etc. They know to respect difference, but they're not as aware as they should be of what these differences should be. So although pupils are being taught generally to respect others, they're not really being taught the nitty-gritty of that and what that really means and what the knowledge of those religions entails. So that's at least 2 schools where that's come up. And again on page 4, White's Wood Academy, that one is mainly about British values. So it's saying that pupils are not well prepared for life in modern Britain. I think some schools kind of thought that British values had dropped off the agenda a bit because we made a big thing of it a few years ago. Maybe not so much now, but it hasn't. It is still there. And actually, Ofsted are quite rigorous about inspecting it. So those of us who work in schools do need to know. Now, if I just go into Chapel St Leonard's, I feel a bit actually here like I'm in a court, you know. And I was going to say here that I have put...
I'll avoid the black cloth.
please, yeah, or sentencing, it would be great. Take her away, yeah. Where it says good, they did have a deep dive, but I couldn't find a mention of it in the report. I was going to say, I'll turn to my learned friend, because Jill said, I'll have a check, my heart dropped. I thought, I bet she's going to say, oh, it is there, and I've missed it. Now, how strange is that? That we've got a school where it's not a deep dive, well, more than one, in fact, and RE is mentioned, and here we've got a deep dive, you know, rare as anything, and yet there's no specific mention of it in a report. I mean, honestly, it does make you throw your hands up slightly in horror. The point of a deep dive is to find out what's going on, and yeah, it would actually be quite a good idea then to tell us what you found out. So interesting, that one. I wonder what the school made of it. Really no idea. So strange, isn't it? The other school with a deep dive is on page 5, was Caister Grammar School. In many subjects, such as religious education, the curriculum is well sequenced so that pupils build on what they learned before. But again, that's quite generic, actually. It's not particularly specific about RE. Above it, though, there is a cause for concern. Look at that one. The school requires improvement, but before it was outstanding. So something's gone wrong here. Something's amiss. And you look at the comments there about what they call a personal development programme. I've no idea exactly what that includes, but they're saying it's at an early stage, not well developed. Pupils are struggling to remember British values. They've not ensured that a culture of mutual respect and inclusivity permeates all aspects of school life, etc., etc. Many have gaps in their knowledge of British values and mutual respect and tolerance of those with different faiths and beliefs. And I think it'd be entirely appropriate to go back to where we were pre-pandemic, Chris, and get in contact with the school and ask them what they've done to address those things.
I think that's a good idea, Wendy.
Follow that up, as with any of them that have comments like that. Lincoln Castle Academy, again, I can feel Jill behind me, I can feel things coming. They run something called the Life Curriculum. Now, this is in place. Sometimes when we see this, we do get the horrors because we think it can sometimes mean a curriculum where lots of things are thrown in with very little rigour. And there's a lot of vague talk of sort of ethics and morals and so on, but it's not very, very rigorous. It's not clear what pupils are meant to be learning, and certainly in terms of disciplinary knowledge of different subjects, it just ain't there. So here we've got there's a life curriculum in place, but it is helping pupils develop understanding and their relationships with different faiths and cultures. However, I think it'd be quite interesting to investigate that a bit and see exactly what their life curriculum does include, because it could be one that's doing it really well. Thank you. That was great, wasn't it? The comedy timing there was brilliant. We are now giving up our jobs and going on the road with a comedy act. And the timing was perfect. Well, thank you for that. So,
Wendy, can I just say something?
you can say whatever you like, Jenny. Oh, I need to.
No, just, well, you know as well, Mark, don't you, the head of department from that school left and she was struggling with this life. It was careers, PSHE, it was not, I mean, that comment does not reflect what we know from our colleague who is no longer there. She went to Lincoln College because she wants to teach religious studies. She doesn't want to teach life. So I think that's quite interesting the way they've...
It is interesting. Now, I probably shouldn't say this at all, but what it does, I'm going to, is what often happens in Ofsted inspections now is because they are so short, inspectors don't really get time to get to grips with things properly. So I don't think they do always interrogate things in the depth that's required. Now, I'm not saying all inspectors, and I'm not saying all schools, but sometimes we've all done it, I think, in this room. We've read something and we've thought, well, that doesn't sound like the school that I know, but there we are. It's there. So,
Gillian's after you, yeah.
yeah. Sorry, Jill. Oh, sorry.
I know. I think this is pertinent to us, and it's pertinent to conversations that are coming later in the agenda, Chair, if that's all right. I had cause recently to speak with the national lead for RE for Ofsted, based on an inspection that took place out of this county, but that also delivers life curriculum. What had come up in that inspection, and I suspect this might be something to follow up with some of the schools that have comments in red on this report, was the assumption on the part of the inspector that good quality religious education means teaching a little bit about the big six. So if the children can't immediately talk about Buddhism or Sikhism or Judaism, it is assumed that they have a poor quality of RE. And as you will all know, our syllabus requires schools to do much, much more depth on 3 religious worldviews: Christianity, Hinduism, and Islam. It doesn't mean the others aren't looked at, but they won't have the same depth of understanding in those other traditions that they have for the big. Asking the child, having had the conversation with the national lead, collectively sufficient or collectively we must do that by law, but then there must also RE teachers and subject leaders had pushed back a little that we're finding in these reports. So yes, 100% they may need additional look like that is not aligned with the RE research review.
A few weeks ago, weeks ago, on Twitter, some thought, well, why not put them out there? Okay, let's pass them on to teachers. And this is not a great idea, really, because these were aid memoirs they're not really clear about what some of the subjects mean. I don't just mean in RE and secondary, and they also include details of Ofsted. Anyway, so that's where we are, and we'll keep tracking that term on term.
Can I just ask a question also? Should we follow up with that Ofsted are doing a deep dive and then making absolutely no comment? Ofsted itself, the inspector that did the job.
My experience of schools sometimes, when they get things like this or things that don't quite fit, and I know you know what I'm going to say, don't you? They'll say, don't, because don't rock the boat. We did better than we thought. We don't want to. I'm not saying that means we shouldn't. I'm just saying that is sometimes what they'll say. Yes, so you got a deep dive, but there was no mention. What was the process like for you? I think I'd be more inclined to take it that way and then go from there, Mark, probably. Because there might have been a reason, and there could be a backstory here that we don't know about. So I wouldn't really want to go in all guns blazing with Ofsted first, but I'll certainly get in touch with the school, because it's fascinating, isn't it, why that should have happened. There's nothing. I mean, all these other schools that haven't got a deep dive, they've got far more mention. So very strange, and I'll report back, Chris, at the next meeting on that one. So I'll definitely follow it up, Mark, definitely.
Any other questions, colleagues? It's quite interesting, because it's such a wide chamber. It's not that I'm discriminating against Mark. It's just you don't always see the periphery of the chamber, not the periphery of the person. So that moves us on to, I think that's Gillian's next, am I right? Analysis of CIAM's inspections.
Thank you very much. As I am looking at my report compared to Wendy's, I am mindful of the fact that clearly CIAM's inspectors are not catching up quite so quickly as Ofsted inspectors, because only one school in Lincolnshire has been inspected since the last report that I compiled, and that is Skellingthorpe St Lawrence's primary school, not far from here. You can see from this report that the sort of detail that the inspector goes into in relation to what we as a committee are interested in, which is RE and collective worship, is significantly greater than you would find on an Ofsted report, even where there may have been a deep dive in RE. So the level of detail here is greater, I think. But you can see here that this school is doing well, the subject is well led, The children are getting a good understanding of a range of different religious worldviews, including Christianity, and that assessment has been identified as an area for improvement. The comments on collective worship are rather more fulsome in their praise, and the school got a strong outcome for the collective worship as well. I know as a committee we very rarely have to deal with questions about collective worship. I don't think ever have received a request for a determination. Never from any Lincolnshire school, but it is still a statutory requirement for all local authority maintained schools for every school and academy, that daily act of collective worship should be taking place. So if we ever did have any requests for further guidance, it's good to know that there are some schools in the region we can point towards to offer support. Happy to take any questions if anyone's got any.
Why do you think we've only had the one inspection?
I suspect because during the period of the pandemic, quite a few inspectors retired, and that led to a need to recruit many more, but it is extremely difficult to train an inspector to be a good inspector when schools are closed and inaccessible. Therefore, I think we are at a point now where there are many trainee inspectors who are just waiting to have their final sign-off inspection. So I am expecting in the next term or two that my report will become much longer. But at this point in time, there are limited numbers of inspections taking place.
Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, Jill. And still with Jill, item 11, diocesan update.
Thank you. This is just a verbal update, and to be perfectly honest, it is not significantly different from the previous update that I gave you, in large part because my time at the moment is mostly taken up with the work on the RE Council of England and Wales's Worldviews project, and that will be running until 2024. And I'm also involved in 2 action research projects, one primary in this region and one secondary that's working nationally on assessment and religious education, because there is very little evidence out there of what good quality assessment looks like under the current educational context. So that's a large part of the work, alongside all of the normal sorts of things that Wendy does as well: school visits, training for staff, mentoring, coaching, supervising, initial teacher education training, all of that kind of stuff.
Thank you, Jill. Any questions? No? Thank you very much, Jill. Moving on to item 12, review of Lincolnshire Agreed Syllabus for Religious Education. Sexy title.
Some of you might be surprised to know this has come round already. Again, particularly for people, this is agenda item 12 of the paper, page 19. For those of you who haven't been through this process, sorry if this is a little bit tedious, but just to set out, this paper sets out the background and the statutory requirements, which of course are that standing advisory councils are statutory bodies for local authorities. But as you'll see about 4 lines down the first paragraph, SACREs also oversee the 5-year revision of the local agreed syllabus for RE. So that's going to, that's come round, and our syllabus will need to be reviewed and finished by next year. Well, the middle of the year, really. And for the purpose of preparing a local agreed syllabus, the local authority has to convene something which is quite clunkily called an agreed syllabus conference. That's just a group of people. And its role is to produce and recommend the syllabus that fully meets the requirements of the Education Act and so on and so forth. Now, what this really means, cutting through it all, is that only SACRE can recommend a syllabus, okay? And it has to have a group either within SACRE, a separate group called an Agreed Syllabus Conference, or it consists of all SACRE members, but it has to be seen as a separate body that takes on this work. When I say takes on this work, What I really mean is that Jill and I, with teachers, will probably do the bulk of this work and bring that work to Sacre. But Chris, for the purpose of this meeting, what we have to consider, the first thing we have to consider is whether Sacre wants to set aside a group that wants to do that, say half a dozen people, and they could meet separately to Sacre meetings, or it would be the whole Sacre who would probably meet, the meeting would be tacked on at the end of each meeting. You wouldn't, you know, so you'd finish our meeting now, and then you'd see the meeting's closed. Now we're having a meeting of the agreed syllabus conference. So that's for Sacre to think. There's not so many people here today, so I don't know about how we take that forward. But anyway, that's where it is. Our context is that our present syllabus runs from 18 to 23. Now, you'll be glad to know it's not anticipated that a detailed rewrite is required, but this needs to be discussed with the agreed syllabus conference because it's your syllabus in the end. In addition, many changes have taken place since the present syllabus was produced. So these are things that have taken place as that form part of our syllabus, but are not necessarily part of the teaching content. So for example, numerous different approaches towards RE, not least a new Ofsted framework, the most recent Ofsted research review into RE, which has informed a lot of stuff that we do, and various updates, including a new framework for the early years foundation stage. So we've got to rewrite all those sections anyway, because they're now out of date. And in addition to that, we may well want to tweak sections based on different religions and so forth. So that's our context. The timescale is that we really need to agree a way forward now in this meeting, because we really need to have this new syllabus in place by summer of next year. Can I just say, I really don't think this is going to take the amount of work that the present syllabus took, because that was almost a start from scratch. Now, we have sent a questionnaire out to schools to provide us with an idea of changes teachers would like to see. We haven't analysed that yet because Jill and I haven't had time to get together to do that, but we will share that with Sacre. So in terms of funding, I expect that the bulk of the work will be done by Jill and myself. We'll be working with teachers, but hopefully this time some of those might be able to take place via Zoom or Teams, thereby saving us money and time. Previously, it was really difficult to get teachers together to meet to discuss the syllabus. Then online training to the changes would be provided by us as well. So again, I think we would see this as online rather than, remember last year, nearly 5 years ago, we were talking, we found ourselves in the strangest venues. I was at a health centre once with a massage room next to the room that I was, and that's another story. And I know Jill was in a room when she had about 90 people, where we thought about 60 were going to turn up. That's a very odd experience, but we did train a lot of people. But this time, because it will be more updates, we will be able to do it between us online much easier. So that will reduce costs still further. So I've spoken to Jill Chander-Nair, who holds the budget for Sacre. The budget is unchanged for April, but she's saying that there isn't enough money to provide hard copies, and she's of the mind that all schools they'd prefer an electronic version anyway. So that's where that is. So the next steps are that at our meeting now, we need to recommend how to go forward, and then we pass this recommendation on to the local authority. So in a nutshell, we have to decide how Sacre wants to move, either as a whole group or a smaller group. And then if Sacre is in agreement, Jill and I will move forward with the work alongside teachers and report back at the next meeting. So it depends how you want to take that forward, Chris, really.
Thank you. Yeah, I've just got a few comments and questions, if that's okay. So I think a year ago, I would have understood that it's not anticipated that a detailed rewrite is required. However, with all those changes, and particularly the World Views project and all that's happening, is that still the case? Because I wonder if RE seems to be moving at such a pace at the moment. And I think that's just a question and a comment. Is that still the case, that we think that it doesn't need a detailed rewrite, because I'm not sure anymore, although, sorry teachers, if there's any teachers in the room, because I know that's big. And the other thing is, do we have to have it changed by 2023? And the reason I ask that is, we know that Religion and Worldviews project is not finished till 2024. I wouldn't like us to do work on it and then have to change it again, or not change it and Lincolnshire get left behind in how RE is moving forward. We don't know the state of the politics, but it is likely there may be a different government. Is that going to change things in the next year or so? I know we can't predict all of these things. I'm just conscious that we could do this work, but it's a little early, and I don't know what the legalities of that is, and do we say that it's just a rewrite? Does that make sense? Because I'm just conscious of how things are moving forward.
Yeah, when I was talking about that, I was talking mainly, really, I think, about the content of the teaching stuff, if I can put it like that. And I think some of the other things, like New Ofsted framework research, can be, it's quite a bit of work, but it's relatively easy to do, and sort of thing we can do at home. That's what I meant, really. So I take your point, though, about the other project, and can it be put off? I think there's no argument to say yes, it can. In fact, I think that you can apply, you can make an application to add a year or so on. Wasn't it because of the pandemic?
Yes.
So we could go under that.
North and North East Lincolnshire deferred by a year because of the impact of the pandemic.
So we can. Yeah, we can apply to defer, and that's certainly one way forward. And I think that's a good point you make. You also make a good point about it's never the right time, because you can get to 2024 and say, oh, but, you know, this could have happened. I mean, I'm in the middle of reviewing one for another local authority, and we're having exactly the same conversations. Oh, but this could have happened and that could have. So it is a tricky, but that is for SACRE to decide. So it's a very good point. If SACRE decides to ask for a deferral, we can certainly try to do that, and National SACRE would be our first point of call. So that would be opening that for discussion, really, Chris. Okay, yeah. Well, actually, what would your view be on it, Jill?
I'm thinking about the teachers, I suppose. I think it's fair to say that although our syllabus was launched in 2018, it perhaps was not well embedded in all schools across the county when the pandemic hit. And obviously curriculum was slightly put on hold during the 18-month period of disruption during the pandemic. So I would say it's only really since autumn term 2021 that schools are beginning to properly get to grips with the current syllabus. Not everywhere, but I'm certainly aware that there are some schools that are now contacting me with great levels of stress that they are thinking they're going to have to start again. And they've only just about got their heads around how things are right now. The only other niggle I have in my head a little bit is that our current syllabus is really rooted in building knowledge about particular religious worldviews. And that is one perfectly valid way of doing it. But I do think there's a conversation there about the balance of religious worldviews that we have and whether they continue to be the most appropriate for this region. But similarly, the conversation about whether tracking it by religious worldviews is the direction of travel for the subject generally, because for some regions it is, and for other regions they are going in a different direction. And I think that question around consistency is key, particularly where we've got a mixture of academies and local authority maintained schools, that you don't want to end up with a situation where schools and academies are doing entirely different things and they are not able to support each other. But those feel like detail level questions for the ASC as opposed to this particular decision making process at the moment.
Thanks, Jill, for that.
If I can just support what Jill said, that last point, I was just saying I'm working on another syllabus at the moment, and they've definitely, we're moving far away from the approach of looking at it through religions. In fact, we're going through about 3 main concepts and building up knowledge and experiences of lived religions and so on. It's a very exciting syllabus because it feels alive. I feel very, very comfortable with it, and I think it's going to transform learning. So I think that's a key point to take on. So although I sort of optimistically said it may not take a big rewrite, if the agreed syllabus conference looks at it and says, well, actually, maybe it does, maybe we want to look at something in a different way, we have to be open to that as well. So.
Thanks, Jill. So we have in fact two decisions. One is whether or not we want to ask for a deferral, and then the structure of the body that we use. So who is in favour, shall we say, by a show of hands, of a deferral in the light of... Do you want to speak, Cherry?
Obviously, we would appreciate, because we've appreciated, I'm sure all of us, all the comments that have been made, but could we just have a little tiny bit more guidance as to, obviously we will make up our own minds, but just a tiny bit more guidance about actually what do we think, asking our professionals, the three people that have been speaking, and others, of course, within the room who will have that knowledge. But could you give just a little bit more guidance about the decision you think that you would be recommending? We'd just like a little bit, I would like a little bit more guidance on a clear recommendation.
Do you mind if I go first, Jill? Then I'll hand over you. When we started looking at this a few months ago, I was minded to think, well, maybe it doesn't need too much change. Feedback we'd had from other sort of questionnaires seemed fairly positive and so on. But I suppose I've been influenced because I've worked on other schemes at the moment. And I did start to think maybe this does need more work than I originally anticipated, but do we actually want to go down that route, and have we got the capacity? And capacity is an important word, I think, because both Jill and I are often stretched to capacity as it is, as is funding. So I think we're constrained by that. We might not want to be, but we are. But that doesn't mean to say we couldn't make key changes. It doesn't. And what we have to do, first and foremost, is think about what's right for children's learning and what's going to move learning on in RE and keep it looking up to date, fresh, and something that children want to engage with. So I think I'm open, in other words, to look at slightly more detailed change than I perhaps thought originally. Secondly, I think the idea of having an agreed syllabus where everybody is part and stays on after a meeting is a neat one, because you don't have to keep arranging new meetings. However, if we went down the road of producing a more detailed report, we might well decide that we wanted a smaller group, because I remember that's how we did it before, and that seemed to work quite well. Jill, what did you think on those?
Well, I have to declare an interest, obviously, being part of this Worldviews project. I think there have been some exciting moves in recent years away from a model of RE that perceives the subject as giving children boxes full of facts about different religions. And I think that model is problematic for a few reasons. I think it's problematic because on the time we have available in school, children necessarily come away with generalizations about different religious traditions. So all Sikhs do it like this and all Muslims do it like that, and that's not true to real life at all. I think it's problematic because we tend to teach the subject in categories that fit Christianity, but do not necessarily fit other traditions as authentically. So, for example, places of worship, festivals, rites of passage, holy books. If you ever tried to teach Hindu Dharma in the classroom and identify what the holy book is for Hindus, it's a nightmare. It doesn't work like that. And so we have been forcing our teaching of religious traditions into a model that fits Christianity, and that's not appropriate for those other traditions. So I think there are some very interesting moves in terms of looking at, so the project that Mark and Wendy have been working on, looking at big ideas that cut across different religious and non-religious traditions, like power and authority. You know, those are big, big ideas that have pertinence for lots of different traditions. So that's one potential direction of travel. Another direction of travel would be to look to the RE Council's draft National Statement of Entitlement, which again provides some useful categories for thinking about how you might structure a syllabus or a curriculum in a school. So I think there are options, and my slight concern is that if we continue to have a syllabus that builds learning on here's my box about Islam, here's my box about Christianity, here's my box about Hinduism, our authority will be potentially left behind. So that's a concern I have. If, like Wendy, if we are looking at a major rewrite of any sort, I would ask for a deferral to give us the time to get our heads around it properly and build up the capacity, particularly in terms of identifying teachers and RE subject leaders around the region who might have an interest and a passion for working on this alongside us. And I think if we are looking at a major rewrite, again, whether we have a smaller ASC or whether we have the whole SACRE as the ASC, I think the ASC would need to almost delegate the work to a working party who can then report back to the ASC. I hope that helps.
Thanks very much for that, Jill, and thanks very much, Wendy. So, yes, Mark.
Okay, let me just, I'm not sure if it's throwing a spanner in the works or raising a question. In view of the fact that Wendy is working with another local authority, I know in some parts of the country, local authorities have worked collaboratively to create a joint syllabus. And I wondered, you would know the context of that, Wendy, whether that might be an appropriate thing for us to do, to look for the opportunity to work collaboratively with that group and possibly others as a regional syllabus rather than just the Lincolnshire syllabus.
Certainly, I think it's something that we could discuss and think about. The authority I'm working with is Leicester, which is a very multicultural, mixed area compared to Lincolnshire. We've also combined, we're in very early stages with it at the moment, and it is a massive job for us. But one of the other things that we're linking, going back to your big ideas, is we also have a project that we've just begun in Leicester called the Leicester Schools Peace Project. And we've got threads of peace and justice going through our whole syllabus, or well, I'm saying this, we will have. So we have the big ideas up there, as well as things like beliefs and the key concepts. And we've started identifying those. So I think there are, I can feel links, and it could be either very complicated and something that was just too difficult to do, or it could be really exciting. I don't know, but we could certainly have some collaboration, I think. Yeah.
Just to also note, and of course this doesn't need to be a significant factor in our decision making as Lincolnshire SACRE, but just to note that North and North East Lincolnshire currently use the Lincolnshire Locally Agreed Syllabus as the basis of their RE curriculum. So the decisions that we make here for Lincolnshire have the potential to affect those two regions as well. It's a locally agreed syllabus, so whatever we do, it has to have that locality context, if that makes sense. So working with Leicester could be a very powerful thing to do, but it would equally need to be accessible to the schools out on the East Coast. You know, it's that, sorry, I'll turn off.
I totally agree with that. So I think we'd end up with two syllabuses that look different, because then they have to be different in a way, because they're serving different types of communities. And one of the things we have said in our Leicester syllabus is we very much want to Leicester-ise it and not go for the generic, you know, now we're teaching about, now you've got to do Islam, now you've got to... So it would have that spin on it. But at the same time, I think these other links, like the peace and justice thing and the big ideas thing, not that we're calling it that, but they're things that could cut through some of the work, if you see what I mean. So I think we could have collaboration on it, certainly, yeah.
Yes, Andrew.
Is it a given if we ask for a deferral that we get one, or is that not necessarily the case?
Gillian.
I've recently worked with North and North East Lincolnshire. I'm not aware they applied to anyone for a deferral. I think as SACRAs, they decided that a deferral of a year was appropriate because of the impact of the pandemic on schools.
Thanks for that. Is that okay, Andrew? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that, we were looking at a position where we're saying to start with, this is going to be a quite simple job and we can have it done, but we can have it done by the summer. And now we're talking about it being quite a long, complex job, which is clearly not going to be done by the summer. So if we can get a deferral and do the long, complex job, that's one thing. But if we can't get the deferral, I would have been saying that it would be perhaps better to do the easy version now and work towards the long, complex job in 5 years' time and maybe start earlier so we've actually got the time to do it properly and not do a rush job.
Gillian.
I think it would be very likely to get a deferral, particularly on the grounds that Jill mentioned about it not even being embedded in a lot of schools until 2021. So I don't think that would be
Just to be clear, in terms of procedure, it's the local authority that provides the syllabus. The SACRA recommends the syllabus to the local authority. So if we, as a SACRA, were to be seeking a deferral, we would be applying to Lincolnshire local authority for that permission, if that makes sense.
What a cynical view of Lincolnshire County Council. Good job there's no councillors present, only a city councillor. Right, yes.
Obviously, another reason we wanted the deferral was the comments that Lindsay made with regards to major things that are happening. What was the main major? The Religion and Worldviews project, because that originally, when we started talking about deferral, that was the reason that we would look at it, so that we weren't going to miss any areas out. But obviously, our discussion has gone further than that. So perhaps we were looking at a deferral not just for the reason of actually perhaps looking to work with, for example, Leicester, but also the fact that we were hoping to wait for the outcomes.
Thanks very much. A very high quality debate, which I'm sure doesn't happen all that often in this chamber. Oh, sorry about that. Only joking. Right, so I get the sense of the room that we are thinking of a deferral, but I do need a formal proposer for that. Thank you, Lindsay, and a seconder. Thank you, Andrew. All those, any against? That's the wrong way around. All those in favour? I think that's unanimous. And our second decision is the way in which we prepare for this.
well, in light of what Jill said, and she's absolutely correct about the LA, Jill Chandana is our LA person. So I guess it would initially go to her because she's our link to the local authority.
Happy with that. And then the structure of our preparation for the new syllabus, that I'm guessing that your advice is going to be that we tack this on to the end of the meetings.
Should we wait and see which way we're going to go and then bring it back to the next meeting? When we'll have a bit more time to meet with Jill. We can put something together for an item for our next meeting, and hopefully Jill might be here. Jill Chandana might be here at that meeting as well.
Thanks, Wendy.
Okay.
Thanks, colleagues. We're there on that then. Item 13, update from local authority advisor, verbal report from Wendy.
That's just to say that much as Jill's work, I've been much the same as Jill's work, being involved in training teachers, still online. We're still doing online training. That's not gone away because it saves us time and we can pack a lot more in, even though it's not always as good as face-to-face training. So I've been doing some of that as well. An increased demand for staff meetings, interestingly, particularly about how to teach about different religions. So that's ongoing. And same as Jill, involved in teaching initial teacher training groups. Also busy starting the annual report, and of course the work's going to be around the agreed syllabus whenever that starts or finishes. So it's nice to feel that everything's got back to normal, I think. It's good to be in schools again, and although I am doing some online training because it's just easier for teachers to get out, at the same time we are going to dip our toe in the water and try some face-to-face full-day training in the summer term. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, everything's going well. Scores are positive. Seeing some really good RE, but maybe I'm not seeing so much of the ones where it needs the support, looking at these Ofsted reports. So maybe it needs to be a bit more of a focus on that. And I'm very aware that the bulk of my work is still on with primary schools, because that's just the way it is, and that it kind of makes you a bit reactionary, because you're reacting to requests from schools, and they tend to be schools where they're doing it fairly well anyway, or they just want help to make it even better. But I think if I had an aim for April onwards, it would be to get in schools where perhaps it's not so good, and to give them some support, and also to change my emphasis a bit to working more in secondary schools as well. Okay,
Thanks for that, Wendy. Moving on to item 14, Sacre self-assessment tool, which is being led by Cherry.
Yes, thank you. I made the mistake, everybody, of being enthusiastic about this document. So Wendy and Chris said, oh, wow, great. Okay, so here we are. It's quite a long document. I'm not sure whether you will have had a chance to read it. You might have sort of skimmed through it. I have had a chance to read it thoroughly. Obviously, it's been developed because they want to try and support SACREs in their self-evaluation, and I think it is actually very supportive. There might be people within this room who've got far more experience than me who could think of things how it could have been done better, but for me it seems like a very good document. Obviously it has been developed to help SACREs in their role in meeting the entitlement of pupils across the local authority, and they talk about engaging in high quality RE and collective worship, and to support the local authorities and reflect on practice, which I think is important. And it's also about standards and accountability, and saying that should be top of our agenda, which we are aware of. And I also like the fact that it noted that the work of SACREs is becoming increasingly challenging and diverse. I hope that when you look at the document, you will think that actually, though, given the expertise and quality of the people who advise us, that actually we are meeting that. And not only within house, but for example, as Wendy has said, working with other local authorities as well, because I think that's hugely important. So the toolkit in the end highlights 5 dimensions of SACRE's work, and it provides exemplification of good practice in each area. And they want us to use this self-evaluation guidance to have a clearer picture of our strengths and those areas that we need to develop. And then obviously to develop that into an action plan. So interestingly, hopefully, see if you agree with this, we've got the various sections set out in the document, which you all received obviously in your pack, but also if you've got your paper copy here. But the idea is to send you a Word version so that you can read it, hopefully, thoroughly when you have the time, and indicate yourselves within each of those areas. So you've got section 1, which is the management of the SACRE and partnership with the local authority and the key stakeholders. You've got section 2, section 3, section 4 and section 5. And the idea would be that you actually read it very carefully, indicate where you think we are within each of those areas. So for example, you have the choice of requires improvement, struggling, developing, established or advanced. So if you actually have a look at each of those areas, decide where you think we are as a SACRE. Underneath those sections, you've also got a little box where you would be able to actually put your ideas of how we could develop in that area. Obviously, if we're advanced, it means we're doing very well. But it's still, even the whole point about being advanced is that you're constantly looking at how you could improve it even further, because that's how you stay there, isn't it? Doing very well is because you are constantly looking at how we can improve. So that's what we would do with that. So it's a case of asking you if you think it's a good idea. We send you it as a Word document, you read it thoroughly, you indicate in each of those areas where you think we stand at the present time. You give any ideas for how you think we might develop this. I've agreed that I will have all this documentation. I will collate all this information, bring it back to us at the next meeting, and the idea is that then we would draw up an action plan from that. And obviously we have the expertise. We have Wendy, we have Gillian, but we have a huge amount of expertise also on SACRE to enable us to draw up that action plan and then move forward on that action plan. So it wasn't a case of going through each of those sections today because it's a very long document, but it was actually having a plan of action as to how we are going to meet with this toolkit, because I think it actually is, I think it will be very helpful to us indeed. And also, I think it's our duty to do so. We have a local authority that actually funds SACRE. We have our advisor to the council, we have Gillian, and I think that we certainly have a duty to our local authority. Most of all, we have a duty to our young people through our schools, etc. But I think that we should move forward on this.
Thank you very much for that, Cherry.
Any
I do echo, now I'm being serious, I do echo the point that we have an excellent local authority in terms of the support that it brings to religious education and to SACRE. And I know it compares well to other authorities. Now, Cherry's asked us a question, I think quite a serious question about how we approach this. So, are there any views on that, or shall I just generally ask you if you're happy for this to come out to you as a Word document so that we can all participate, getting sort of a nod from people? Yeah, we're okay to go with a nod on this? That's democracy in its own way. Thank you for that, Cherry.
Yeah, that's great. So if people send that back to me, and obviously, Emily, if that was, I mean, obviously we have colleagues not here today, but if it was explained to them, and then it's just a case of whether we send them back to Emily and you send them back to me, or you send it back directly to me. Which do you think is the best, Emily?
Yeah, I can always send a prepaid envelope for it to come back to me and then collate them all and put them back to you in one go. Would that be easier, Cherry?
That would be super, thank you. So as I say, but you'll have the Word document to do it on, so you can just do it electronically and send it back.
There's a system. Thank you very much. Our last sort of weighty item, as it is item 15, a review of the performance of religious education.
Actually, it's not weighty. It looks as though it is, but it isn't. This is just on every month or two, NASACA, National SACRE, says this is what should go on your agenda for your SACRE meetings. And this review of the performance of RE is one of them for this meeting. So you've got a copy of it. As you can see, it's just a collection of a mass of information, some statistics that are quite hard to understand unless you know the background, like a lot of all stats. Some of them are thought-provoking, some of them less so. Cherry and Chris and I talked about it before the meeting, and I said to them, I'm not really sure what we should do with it. And so they said, well, let's just put it out there and see what people make of it. So it really is open to you. Here you've got loads and loads of stuff. I mean, what do you want me to say, really? Yes, I'm not going to pretend for 1 second I've done a detailed analysis of all these pages because as I haven't. But it does give some interesting insights. But as I say, as with any stats, when you get things like percentages of people and things like that, you think, who did they ask? How many people did they ask? What does it mean? And what sort of an increase? And one at least is quite contradictory. So, but some bits of it are, you know, but I do find things like, for for example, 64% of the UK adult population think an education in religion and worldviews is an important part of the school curriculum. Well, what about the rest of the percent? What about the 64%? What about the others? And who did they ask? And what informed of those people? So some of them are a bit tricky. But I guess some of them might be interesting to throw out in meetings you're in for support, or in, what do you use it in school? Any of it in school? Yeah, that's more like it, I think, especially if you're doing your selling RE job.
It might be pertinent just to note the sort of penultimate page, which is about government performance. And I think the bit of that that's particularly relevant to us is the removal of any form of funding, either in terms of training specialist teachers or in terms of broader curriculum-based projects in the subject. I recently attended, as part of a national RE conference, a talk given by Tom Fletcher, who used to be a diplomat based in the Middle East and is now president of Hertford College, Oxford, I think. And he has been working with colleagues internationally on, what sorts of educational priorities we have as a species, as opposed to what is happening in England. And he was quite strongly noting that the discussions about education in this country tend to be quite parochial and don't really necessarily think about bigger picture questions like the impact of climate crisis on social stability across the world, for example. And there is a need, I think, to financially invest in ensuring that children and young people are able to navigate diversity and difference well in a context in which conflicts are increasing. I read an article this morning about people who are currently living in Skegness, having crossed the Channel, having been moved from that big camp in Kent, and they've been placed in Skegness, and overwhelmingly their experience is of being unwelcome. And I think there is a role for RE to play in helping children navigate difficult and challenging ethical and moral questions, and also in understanding difference and diversity. And it is clear that the government that is being looked at in the context of this particular piece of work has not put any money into this. So I think there is, we could express a view.
Jennifer.
Just to pick up on that, I've got one of the 2 trainees in the county working with me in my department as specialists, and she gets 0 funding to train. Meanwhile, the chemist next to her gets £24,000 to train. So it's really demoralising for these people. The other one is with a BG with Mark and Eleanor. And I've actually been, because we've been working with Farmington projects, I've asked Sir Ralph Waller if he could do anything, and he's offered them both £1,000 each, which is brilliant, but it's a drop in the ocean. And when you see statistics like that, where is the backing, when actually the thing that's fundamental to these children to understand is that sort of spirituality and that importance and care for humanity. I just think it's horrific, really. So.
Wendy, did you have more to say there? Yeah, I think we are being called upon to have a view, maybe even a controversial one. Is this, Jill, were you saying that we should have a view, do you think?
I think in a democracy, the opportunity to speak and be heard is a right that we ought to take advantage of. And, as a county council with elected members, that right can be exercised. So it might be something that SACRE would like to consider, sharing a view with the broader local authority, perhaps requesting that view is shared.
Could that be worded, do you think?
I'm happy to draft something with Wendy on my own, whatever you prefer to share with SACRE, to then be passed on to the local authority.
So let's do that. Everybody's nodding at me. Yeah? What controversial lot you are. Gosh. So, unaccustomed as I am to such things. So,
Can I just say,
Yes,
Chris,
Wendy.
I think it's worth mentioning to members as well that we are quite unusual in Lincolnshire, that our funding has continued year on year to support RE and Sacre. And although we might say, well, it isn't much, is it? No, it isn't. And it certainly doesn't pay for me to be full-time, for example. But I was just looking at some stats for Sacres across the country, and it's just appalling. That there's zero and no advisor at all. So the trouble is, you start being grateful for small things, and then you look at the big picture and you think, well, they're getting millions, and I know in Leicester we get a tiny amount of money for our Sacre. It's run almost entirely on goodwill, and we're constantly, and unless you've been through this, you don't know how tiring it is. We are constantly having to write in bids for money. Constantly. It's on nearly every agenda because we just have no money. So we have good ideas, but we have no money. So we have to keep going to people to plead, please. And it's pathetic, really, isn't it? In the end, that you've got to do this when you look at some of these facts and figures and you think, but why is it like this? It's because it's not valued, it's not seen as important. And and from that point of view, but it just makes you wearied in the end, because you think we're constantly struggling. So at least there is something to be grateful for to Lincolnshire. They have ever since the days of Tim way back, who fought for it, and Christine Talbot, we have been well funded, but it is a sad, sorry state, really.
well, thank you. Grateful for small mercies as we are. And I am reminded of Christine Talbot now, because I could feel a rant coming on, and I'm sure that is the spirit of Christine Talbot, who still occupies these benches from time to time. So it's not radical enough, Chris. I can hear her saying it. So with your agreement then, colleagues, we'll ask Wendy and Jill to draft something up. We'll send it around. And if we don't receive any massive objections, then we'll have a meeting with the representative of the local authority with a view to taking that radical thought, that very correct view forward. So, thank you for that. We're on date and time of next meeting. Before I do that, again, thank you to our colleagues, Jess and our colleague Ellie, and thank Jasmine again for attending. I hope that what she's experienced today has caused her to be full of wonderment for the future of Sacre, and also perhaps think whether or not we make sufficient contribution towards the Sikh community. So that's just a thought to share. So, colleagues, date and time of the next meeting is scheduled to take place on the 7th of March 2023. So I hope you've all got your 2023 calendars now and you're ready. I am therefore able to wish you a happy and holy Christmas and a happy New Year. And Emily, yeah?
Can we just jump forward? I think we missed reflections out.
We have. Thank you so much. So, can I arm twist? I mean, can I ask somebody to do a reflection for the next meeting? And I'm looking around. Sean, thank you so much for volunteering. It's really appreciated. So, ask Sean to do a reflection at the next meeting. And thank you all, and thank you all for the work that you do in our community.
I'll pass you the minutes, please. Just an initial on each page and signature at the back, please.
Thank you, Cherry.